Welcome to Inside the 12. We are past the halfway point of February, and we are coming up on March. College basketball fans love it. He is King McClure, looking like Shaft. I love it.
Listen, I walked outside. It was about 10 degrees outside this morning in Texas. Today when we're filming this episode, I had to go grab the trench coat. It's the only time of the year I can pull it out, Pete, so today was the perfect day.
I think it's working. He's King McClure. As I said, I'm Pete Souza. Let's start with a look at the scoreboard. A lot of great midweek games. Arizona halting a two-game skid with a good road win at Baylor. Houston and Iowa State, they take care of business. A huge game this weekend. We are excited for that. And also, a couple shockers. TCU knocked off number 9 Texas Tech, and BYU pummeled Kansas by 34 points.
Oh my goodness, after those midweek games, here's a look at the standings. And we mentioned, March will be here soon. Well, the Phillips 66 Big 12 men's basketball tournament is just over 2 weeks away. The top 4 teams are rewarded with a 2-game bye, and the next 4 get an opening round bye.
Yeah, now, as you said, King, this is really important because March 11th, we're in the postseason, and there's a couple of teams that are really pushing to get those byes in the Big 12 tournament, but also there's some teams on the bubble that we're watching right now this time of year, and I think it all starts pretty close to home for you.
Yeah, I have to talk about my alma mater, Baylor. I mean, when you look at these guys, their record is 16-10, 8-7, tied for 6th in the Big 12. Their last game against Houston will be their toughest, but the other 4 remaining regular season games are extremely favorable. If they do what they're supposed to do, if they go out there and play the way that they know that they're capable of, with this small ball lineup, with the guards of Baylor being able to drive the lanes, penetrate, kick out for open shots. I mean, you look at the game they played against Houston, at Houston. They played a really good game. They knocked down shots. They rebounded the basketball. They just turned it over a little bit too much. You clean up some of those turnovers, I think they're fine. I think they have a really good chance to make a run.
One thing about Baylor, 4 straight years they've been a top 3 seed. That's going to change this year, more than likely. Yes. And in the Big 12, Baylor, not necessarily, they haven't played their best basketball. How do they change that this year and play the Big 12? They're going to need a win or 2 in the tournament.
Yes. They're going to have to just learn how to adapt right now. And I think that's one thing that Scott Drew does as good of a job as anybody in the country, right? Being able to adapt on the fly. On all the injuries that he's had, for somehow, I mean, they're still top of the half of the conference. With all the injuries that he had to sustain this whole season, he just finds a way, and now you're creating a new way without Ojon Wuna. So how are you able to keep Norchad out of foul trouble? How do you get Celestine more reps at the 5 to be able to have success when he's on the floor? How do you get your team to be able to rebound night in, night out, to be able to actually lock in on those small things that you typically weren't as locked in on earlier on in the season?
Norchad Omier has been a force. I'll tell you what, another force emerging in the Big 12 right now, to my surprise, is Utah. I mean, you see their record. They're 15-11, 7-8, 9th in the Big 12. The Utes have back-to-back wins over schools from Kansas, right? Kansas State and obviously Kansas on Saturday night was a huge win. They have a really good shot, too, to pick up a few more wins down the stretch. King, one thing about Utah we're seeing now we didn't see earlier, they've gotten a lot tougher. Offensive rebounds. They out-rebounded K-State 21-6. They're playing better defense, and they've got height. They're using it to their advantage.
I really think it's just an adjustment period for this team. I mean, when you look at it, this is their first year in the Big 12. It's not easy. Coming from the Pac-12, a conference in which a lot of people deemed, I don't want to say it, but softer. They're one of the more finessed conferences, right? So to go to the Big 12, a league where there's really no off nights. You have to have that same level of physicality night in, night out. You have to have a different level of focus. I mean, it's all about that adjustment period. And I think we're seeing Utah finally get adjusted and then finally find their footing in the Big 12.
Yeah, another team out in Utah playing pretty well. You can't forget about the Utes' rival, BYU. You have been out in that environment. Yes. It is a tough place to play. They are now 17-8, 8-6, 5th in the Big 12, and they are doing big things. They just blew out Kansas. 34 points last week. Bill Self used his last time out with 14 minutes left. I mean, that tells you how bad it was going. They were down 31 at that point. What have you seen from BYU that makes you think, 1, they can make a run deep in the Big 12, and 2, they could possibly make a run at getting in the tournament?
Yeah, this team is dangerous for me, and for me personally, it's the way they shoot the basketball. I don't think they're ever out of a game. They are never out of a game, and they have a chance to beat anybody. And then when you look at their length, right? When you have Dimon at the 1, you have Nell at the 2, Saunders at the 3. If you want to insert Catchings at the 2-3 spot, you're looking at 5 guys all over 6'7", right? They sit back in that 2-3 zone sometimes, and it's very reminiscent of Jim Boeheim and those long Syracuse teams.
Yeah.
And with the way they shoot the ball, with the way they defend at times, and you have a playmaker like Yegor who can really, really pass the ball and get his teammates shots. I mean, they have a good chance to not just make a run in the Big 12 tournament, but also in the NCAA.
You mentioned Trevin Nell. Dallin Hall also playing really well.
And Hall's playing well, too.
He said after their win against Kansas, we are really starting to hit our stride. We want to put the nation on notice. They're starting to. How about in Fort Worth? They're really starting to do some stuff. They're clearing their throats down there saying, hey, don't forget about us. A huge win for the Horned Frogs last week. They beat a top 10 team in Texas Tech. I was out in Tempe when they beat Arizona State. They have won 4 of 5. Jamie Dixon trying to make his 4th straight NCAA tournament. It is never too late for that guy.
Yeah, I have those guys on Saturday, and you're right, Pete. They are rolling. I mean, when you look at Noah Reynolds is so good, and he's starting to look more comfortable from behind the arc, and he's definitely stepped up. With Frankie Collins being out, you almost wondered who was going to take over that lead guard role. How are they going to be able to respond to that? We talked earlier about Scott Drew being able to adapt. Well, Jamie Dixon's done a good job adapting with his backcourt. When you look at Reynolds, when you look at Alette, I mean, even Trezarian has come on to really step up and be that guy that we know he could be. So when you look at TCU, I mean, they have a good chance to make a run because they're hot. They're getting hot at the right moment, and that's all it's about.
Yeah, you mentioned Trezarian White. That's a guy who was one of their main options in the early portion of the season, has fallen off a little bit, but then he's coming off the bench for you now, knocking down threes. And Noah Reynolds, you know, when he was a kid, he used to work at Old Chicago Pizzeria. The dude is like 500 degrees now on the court, right? Yeah, we're looking forward to keeping this talk going. Later in the show, we're going to be joined by Kelvin Sampson. King's going to tell us why he didn't play for the great coach, because I want to figure that out. We're also going to talk to Rachel Galligan about Big 12 women's hoops. That comes up next as Inside the 12 continues. Welcome back to Inside the 12. Time to talk about the most exciting college basketball conference in women's hoops. We had big wins on the road for some of the top teams. TCU taking care of Arizona State. Baylor getting a 22-point victory out in Colorado. Let's bring in the expert. We are happy to be joined once again by Rachel Galligan, our Big 12 women's analyst and insider. Let's rewind to the start of the week, Rachel. Huge win for West Virginia, 70-57 over Kansas State. How did the Mountaineers take down the preseason favorite?
Well, there's a reason why West Virginia's 9th in the country in scoring defense. They were able to hold Kansas State 24 points below their average, forced a season high 21 turnovers, and West Virginia had 27 points off those turnovers. The backcourt duo of J.J. Quinterly and Jordan Harrison combined for 44 points. And I mean, finally, West Virginia controlled the paint, 40-28. Jordan Thomas had a lot to do with that, with 11 points and 5 rebounds.
Yeah, that was a great matchup. But another great matchup that happened earlier this week was Oklahoma State traveling to the Great Salt Lake. The Cowgirls pulled off a close one. How did they bounce back after dropping 2 of their last 4 games?
Well, another big-time win for the Cowgirls, like you said, another response, another bounce back, and they got it done against a Utah team that had won 7 in a row. Micah Gray was huge late in that game, knocking down shot after shot. She finished with 18 points, 4 of 7 from the perimeter, most of those shots coming late in the game. And then Praise Egarevba had a massive offensive rebound, putback, and one late in the game to help seal it. And that was maybe the most glaring stat, was Oklahoma State's dominance on the glass, out-rebounding Utah 47-31 with 18 second-chance points.
Yeah, the physicality, one of the things that jumped out at me watching the game, too. There are 3 games left in the regular season for each team. Where do you see the Big 12 race going down the stretch?
Well, it's tight. It's interesting. We have seen a little bit of a shift from last week, especially with the West Virginia win over Kansas State. You now just have TCU and Baylor tied for first place. It's important to note those two are going to play one another in the final game of the regular season on March 2nd. Kansas State sits at 12-3, 1 game behind, and we have a 3-way tie of Oklahoma State, West Virginia, and Utah locked up at 11-4. So like you said, 3 games left, and a lot can still happen because all those top teams are going to play one another.
Okay, before we let you go, what are some of the games you are looking forward to this week?
Well, how much time do I have? No, but honestly, West Virginia at TCU on Sunday. West Virginia's been great at home this season, but they've got to prove that they can get it done on the road. It would be a massive resume builder for the Mountaineers, and TCU obviously needing to take care of business to stay at #1. And then Baylor at Kansas State on Monday. Manhattan is a tough place to play. Baylor's now won 7 in a row, and they've been good on the road, but obviously both teams very much trying to keep their conference championship hopes alive.
Looking forward to those 2 games. Looking forward to our next chat with you, Rachel. Thank you so much for stopping by. And, of course, we know you're going to be busy, but when you can, enjoy the weekend of college hoops. Make sure you take it in.
Thank you, guys.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk with Kelvin Sampson about Houston's huge matchup this weekend against Iowa State. Welcome back to Inside the 12. Pete Souza here alongside my man King McClure. All right, we're talking about Coach Kelvin Sampson here. He's going to play host to ESPN's College Game Day, so we know it is a busy week. We really appreciate him taking some time to join us. Coach, again, thank you so much for clearing some of your busy schedule off to spend some time.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on and being able to represent I think the best conference in the country, the Big 12.
I'm still trying to figure out why King didn't go to Houston, but maybe that's a conversation for another day.
You wouldn't now. You wouldn't now.
All right, Coach, we'll get to the showdown with Iowa State this weekend, but we have to talk about the overall season. You're on top of the Big 12. What has been crucial to your team's success this year?
I think it starts with the players and the player leadership. Most teams underachieve, King, because they have poor player leadership. It's not because they're not talented, it's because of the buy-in from your best players. We have 2 terrific leaders in LJ Cryer and Jawan Roberts. Those guys have both won at a high level. They both have great individual accomplishments. But when your best players care more about winning than they do individual statistics, that's when you have a chance to have something special. So I think everything starts with them. The other thing is our staff. I don't like comparing staffs. I don't know if we have the best staff in the country. I have no idea. I don't know most of the staffs. But I know a big part of our success is because of our staff. And it starts with Kellen. And with him, he works with our posts, our 4s and our 5s. And then Casey Beard and Hollis Price work with him. Then the other end, our guards, is Quantus White. And Anthony Goldwire and Ryan Elvin work with him. And independent of each other, there's so much pride that they have in the success of their positions. And I think that really, really carries over in our practices and our game. So having great player leadership and having a great staff is a big part of our success.
You know, Coach, you mentioned Kellen and your daughter Lauren also, on the staff. It is a family there, and that family's seen a guy like Jawan grow, not only as a man, but as a player. How much does that help these guys? The fact that they're insulated in a family-type atmosphere, as opposed to some of the other programs?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought it up. When I came back to college, I was starting to get a lot of calls or text or communication from former great players from the city of Houston that had gone to Arizona or to Baylor, Michigan State, North Carolina, Duke. A lot of these guys were finishing their careers and they were wanting to get into college coaching, so they were asking me for opportunities on the staff. At that moment is when I decided, nope, I'm going to hire my former players. Because if I don't give my guys a chance, who will? So I hired Kellen, I hired Hollis, I hired Quantus. And then we started our managers program, and we interview our managers, and we find out we prefer our managers want to get into coaching. So when you look at our staff, Pete, on the basketball side only, everybody on our staff is a former manager or former player. That means that there are no resumes floating around here or calls coming in from other coaches about somebody they think would be good for our staff, I move everybody up. Now, on the external side, Bobby Champagne is our director of internal operations. He was my director of operations when I coached at Washington State. He's part of our family, who handles everything that you see and keeps us relevant 12 months a year, from a marketing, promoting, social media, graphics, is Lauren. So we've developed a family, but it's a family of opportunity. There's not a program that has the internal loyalty and then external work for something bigger than yourself, which is our program. And I think that has a lot to do with our success.
No, Coach, you definitely have a culture, and I love every single thing about that. I love talking to you. What else I love is this top 10 matchup this weekend against Iowa State. Game day will be there, as we mentioned earlier. What does your team have to do in order to get the victory?
Yeah, I think, we know who we are. So we're not going to have a lot of wild swings in how we play. We have a 3 big rotation of J1 Roberts, JoJo Tugler, and Javier Francis. They have a responsibility each day. For instance, when the ball's shot, I talk a lot about defeating a block out. You can't allow a block out to be a reason why you can't go tip it or get it. Our guards have a responsibility to get the ball stopped at the point of attack. Our bigs are like air traffic controllers. Imagine somebody sitting in the tower and you're responsible for 3 runways and there's 4 planes trying to land. How important do you think communication is between that air control, that guy with the headphones, and those pilots? That to me is what calling a screen's about. It starts with the communication. Is it loud, clear, and concise? And is it on time? If those 2 things are happening, we have a chance to have success in our pick and roll coverage. Okay, what about the 3 guys that aren't involved at the point of attack? Do they understand what their responsibility is? Because everything we teach is 5 people. It takes 5 people to defend a pick and roll. It takes 5 people to get a basket. Somebody's got to pass it, somebody's got to shoot it, then somebody's got to get back on the shot, and 2 people's got to go offensive rebound. So everybody has a responsibility in almost every phase of our attack. Iowa State's good enough to beat anybody in the country. With Monsilovic in the lineup, Iowa State is 18-1. Their only loss was to Auburn in a game they led by 16. So we know we're playing one of the best teams in America, who has one of the best coaches and one of the best rosters and one of the best cultures. I love everything about Iowa State. I just got to know TJ in the last couple of years, and I think he's one of the great coaches in our game. Iowa State's one of the great programs, not just in our conference, in the country. When you play against an Iowa State, you're not playing against this coach and that player, or this coach and these players. You're playing against a complete program.
Well, a lot like Houston. Coach, you mentioned being on time. We got to keep you on time. I know you got practice coming up. Again, we really appreciate it. We could probably talk to you from now till next Tuesday. Yeah. So thank you so much. We wish you luck coming up this weekend.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys having me on. Safe travels, and take care of yourselves.
That was Coach Kelvin Sampson. I mean, doesn't get any better.
It doesn't. I could talk to him for days and days. Love hearing his inspiring words.
Love having him in the Big 12. All right, we'll step aside. When we come back, we're going to run you through the weekend of hoops that lies ahead in the Big 12. Welcome back to Inside the 12. The season winding down, the pressure ramping up. Time now for What to Watch, presented by Children's Health. TCU at Cincy is a good under-the-radar game. Also, Kansas will try to regain their footing as they take on Oklahoma State. We're going to start with the site of game day. We just talked to Kelvin Sampson, 2 p.m. Eastern on ESPN, Iowa State at Houston King. What are your thoughts on this huge game.
And this is going to be a battle of two elite level defenses. I think what it comes down to is Emmanuel Sharp for Houston. When you look at his last game against Arizona State, he hit 4 or 5 triples. I was on that call. Hit 4 or 5 triples, finally finding his footing to be able to knock down shots again, because he was struggling in the last 6 before that. So if he can knock down shots and take pressure off of LJ Cryer, take pressure off Jawan Roberts, take pressure off of Uzan, and he adds another threat because Uzan and Cryer have they've risen to the tide. They've risen their level of play. But if Sharp can knock down shots and be sharp, they have a good chance to win this game. For Iowa State, where does the scoring come from? You notice Houston defense is going to take you out of what you like to do. They're going to clog the lane and make it really hard for you to get downhill. Where does the outside shooting come from? Momcilovic has to be big.
Has to be big. You're exactly right. I share the same opinion. A big test and an important game, 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN+. West Virginia travels to Lubbock. King, what are you looking for in West Virginia to take down Texas Tech? Could be a second straight loss for Texas Tech and Grant McCasland if the Mountaineers can get it going.
Yeah, well, number one, it's going to be extremely difficult because after the upset, I personally know that Grant McCasland was not happy about that. So I know that they're going to be locked in, re-energized, and refocused. For me, West Virginia, you have to find a way to slow down JT Toppin. And you have to find a way to get Javon Small going because too many times there's a lot of pressure on him. Who else is going to step up and score? Will it be Powell? Will it be Hansberry?
You had them against Baylor.
Yeah.
Who was the second guy in that game that you noticed, like, okay, this is someone who can shoulder the load?
Powell. Powell was a guy who can be able to score. He's a great shooter at 6'6", 6'7". You also have Hansberry, who can step out and shoot the 3 and spread the floor. But they have to find a second option to score the basketball because there's too much pressure right now on Javon Small.
Yeah, and there'll be a lot of pressure turned up. All right, late one, 10 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN. It is a good one. Arizona hosting BYU. Arizona finally back at home. Can the Cougars score an upset in Tucson? Would be another upset for them.
It's going to be tough. I mean, the way that the Arizona came into BYU in the first matchup and did what they did to them, it's going to be tough for the Cougars to be able to get a dub at the McKell Center in Arizona. However, I do think if they knock down shots like they normally do, and with the way that they just beat Kansas to handle them, I think that gives your team an extra level of confidence. So I think they do have a chance.
Saturday afternoon affair in Boulder on ESPN+. I'm lucky enough to be calling that one. Baylor's first time back in Boulder since 2010. I know you didn't play there, right?
I definitely didn't play there.
No, how does Baylor keep it going and get a win on the road, an inch closer to the NCAA tournament? I mean, they're a lock to make the tournament, but they got to improve their status.
Yeah, they got to figure out a way to get all of their guards on the same page. If they can get all their guards on the same page to be able to score the basketball, share it the way that they know that they can do, right? And be able to find a way to keep North out of foul trouble, they have a great chance.
Always great to share time with King McClure. That is all for us this week on Inside the 12. For the great King McClure, our entire crew, I am Pete Souza. We'll see you next week.